Hello and welcome to Comic Boom, the comics and education podcast. If you're interested in hearing more about the crossover between comics and education, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Lucy Starbuck-Bradley, and each week I'll be joined by a fellow educator, an academic, a librarian or a creator of comics to discuss their journey into comics and provide some inspiration to influence your practice, and hopefully shine some light on some titles you can bring into your libraries, your classrooms and your bookshelves at home too. This week I'm joined by Vivian Truong. Vivian studied computer animation arts at Bournemouth University. She's a self-taught artist, a natural storyteller and an avid lover of cartoons and comics, perfect for us. Her work focuses on finding the humour in everyday situations and exploring fantastical new worlds. Her first graphic novel, City of Dragons, The Awakening Storm, is listed as a Best Graphic Novel of 2021 by ALA and is a worldwide hit among reviewers. We talk about that in this episode. And she's also the artist behind Cooking with Monsters, a graphic novel cookbook. Vivian is also the official illustrator this year of World Book Day, which is why she is joining me for our World Book Day special. She'll be a contributor to World Book Day 2024 live lesson, which is hosted by BBC Teach on Thursday, the 7th of March at 11 a.m. You can tune in with your classes, with your book groups on World Book Day. Vivian will be joining presenters Maddie Moat and Joe Tasker in the live lesson, along with some other authors and creators linked with World Book Day this year, to create a live lessons pop-up library and delve into fiction and non-fiction, explore different genres together. Vivian's very excited about it. We talk through that in this episode, so more details as you listen in. Here's what Vivian had to say. Hello Vivian, welcome to Comic Boom.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on to our World Book Day special episode. Very exciting. I always start the podcast by asking guests to tell us a little bit about their journey as a comics reader, first of all. Where did your love of comics start for you?
Right, so, I've always loved reading as a kid. I think my first introduction to comics was actually finding, a Beano annual we had. I don't know who it belonged to. I want to say it was maybe my brother's. But yeah, I used to when I was maybe drying my hair or something like that, I used to pick up the Beano annual and just read that, or Hagar the Horrid? Hagar the Horrible? Can't remember. So that was kind of my, introduction to comics. I started to get more into them when I discovered manga at W.H. Smith when I was 11 years old.
You discovered manga in W.H. Smith? That seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Around that time was the first time I've always watched anime, but I didn't know it was anime until maybe when I was 10, when I watched Naruto for the first time. So when I found Tokyo Mew Mew at W.H. Smith, I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? This Japanese comic. And it's all backwards. I got really into it from there. Yeah, only when I was maybe 17 years old was when I started to actually transition to Western, indie comics. And that's when I really got into comic books.
And were you, at that time when you were first started to read comics, were you already into kind of drawing and illustration, or was that something that grew through your reading?
Yeah, no, I've actually always been into drawing pretty much ever since I could pick up a pencil. I've loved drawing because my parents worked all the time. I would always just kind of sit in front of the TV and watch cartoons and draw at the same time. I would maybe draw from whatever I saw on the TV. So my love of drawing kind of grew from there, and comics was just kind of an easy way for me to make up stories with my own characters without having a whole TV production sort of thing.
And so when you first came into contact with comics, was it the images that were drawing you in? Is it the story? Is it the kind of magic of both being combined, do you think?
I think definitely the story. For me, I've always loved reading and telling stories because I loved drawing too. It kind of helped me combine both of my love of storytelling and drawing. That's why I kind of love comics so much. Yeah, so I think for me, as an artist, my number one priority has always been storytelling, and I just find that comics is just a great way for me to tell stories without having to actually writing the words out,
So you've told us a few of the titles that you kind of enjoyed when you were younger. What kind of things are you particularly enjoying reading now? Feel free to give some shout out.
I love reading like fantasy books. I actually just finished reading, if you know Avatar: The Last Airbender, I just read Avatar Kyoshi, those two books. Okay. But I'm kind of giving a break from fantasy right now, and I'm reading Yellowface.
Oh yeah. I've seen a lot of, I think I've listened to a podcast about that, and I've seen it's much talked about.
Yeah, it's kind of a hit right now. It, honestly, like, I'm only kind of in the beginning, but just every page, I'm just like, I've got my jaw dropped, like, oh my God, the audacity of this. But no, I love it. Yeah.
So this is a World Book Day special, as I've said, and you're the official illustrator for World Book Day 2024. How did that come about?
So it was last year. I just randomly found an email in my inbox from the organizers asking me if I'd be interested in becoming like the official illustrator. I mean, I had no idea what that meant at first, but I had to kind of stop myself from internally screaming. I had to like compose myself before I just said yes. Just really think about like what that meant. Yeah. I mean, I tried to give myself maybe like an hour before.
A few deep breaths.
Yeah, because I loved World Book Day as a kid. That really kind of helped me get into reading too. So to be part of something that was kind of really fundamental for me as like a kid, that was just like a really exciting opportunity that kind of just came my way. So after they contacted me and I said yes, and we kind of started drafting some ideas. We talked about what has worked in the past and like maybe what hasn't, and kind of what direction they were looking for this time. So I think my style from last year, my style was quite like comic style. So they were kind of looking for like more energy this time, and kind of think about how we could appeal to all age ranges. I think because in the past, maybe for World Book Day, the graphics, they appeal more for that younger audiences. So try to see if we could like do our best to hit
a bit more range,
like a wider age range. Because
they've tried to do that with the books as well, haven't they? There's some options there which are for more the kind of secondary age reader increasingly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think when you start hitting like maybe preteen or like just teenager years, like that's when everyone starts to kind of fall off reading. So I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to like make characters of like a wider range, so that they could use like different characters for like different types of promotion. Yeah, so the idea that we came up with was to have 6 characters relate back to the 6 reading principles.
That's a cool concept.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the heroes.
So these characters are used to kind of promote World Book Day on the different kind of publicity material and build the themes that they really want to bring out of World Book Day this year. Yeah,
exactly. And it was really important for me to also represent as many different like genders and races as much as possible.
Yeah.
Just like have a really diverse cast.
Now the books are starting to appear in the shops just in the last week or so, and you can see it on the stands for the books and all things like that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I just saw it in person for the first time like yesterday. Well, I mean, I've seen the McDonald's promotions, which is really cool too. But yeah, I just saw the stands yesterday, and I was just really pleased at how it turned out, like making sure like the colours were vibrant enough, and it was just
really cool. Actually, that's one thing that really stands out, I think, in your work is the colours. Like it is so vibrant and feast for the eyes.
Thank you. I have my brother to thank for that. When I started secondary school and taking like kind of art classes, I didn't really know how to like paint and colour, but my brother, he sort of taught me the different things about like tones and like hues, and that kind of really got me started early on really thinking about colour theory. So yes, I really love making like vibrant characters, making sure like each colour like they represent like means something.
That's really cool. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about your process later on, because I'm massively geeky and fascinated by things like that. I know as part of World Book Day, you're also involved in the World Book Day 2024 live lesson with BBC Teach. Everyone can access that on World Book Day through the internet, can't they? Is the content top secret, or can you share a little bit about what people can expect if they tune in with their classes, with their reading clubs in their libraries and so on? What can they expect?
I'm not sure how much I can reveal, but I'll be joining CBBC presenters Maddie Moat and Joe Tasker, along with World Book Day authors Alex Falese-Koya and Dr. Sheila Kanani. We'll be discussing book recommendations. I myself will be drawing a lot of the time.
Love it.
So yeah, I think we can expect a really kind of chilled out workshop, I guess.
That sounds brilliant. How are you feeling about it? Are you nervous about it, or do you just take that kind of thing in your stride?
Oh, I'm really nervous. I don't know. For me, like, public speaking is something I can just about do, but as soon as you like put a camera in front of me, or like if I have to record myself, that's when everything kind of goes out the window, and I'm like, ah. So I don't know. I'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll be okay, or maybe I'll just like be panicking on the spot. Like, hopefully you don't see me start shaking while I'm on camera.
I'm sure you'll absolutely boss it. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. As soon as you're there drawing, you'll just get absorbed into what you're doing, and you'll be fine. I feel bad for asking that.
Oh my god, something to brag about.
I know that World Book Day has the theme of Read Your Way for this year, and I just wondered kind of what that means to you. What does reading your way look like? Yeah,
so I recently discovered that I had ADHD, and I think that's what really affected my reading journey too, as a kid, because I used to really love reading, but at a certain point in my life, like maybe when I was a preteen, teenager, it started to get more and more difficult for me to concentrate with reading. Like, I would read maybe like a couple of sentences and zone out, and then realize I've done that, and I have to go back and reread what I've read, and it would just be like rinse and repeat, and I'd be reading like the same thing over and over again because I would just be zoning out each time. And it wasn't necessarily because the writing was bad or anything like that. It was just literally my issue. And because I used to get like really frustrated that it would be taking me so long to read something, that I eventually kind of gave up reading. And that's how comics coming into my life really played a large role in helping me get back into reading. So for reading my way, I always find that having a good mix of like comics and regular prose books really helps me to like balance out my kind of attention span issues. If I felt like I was struggling to read again, I'd maybe go back into a comic and just kind of help sort of like train my brain to read again, and then I'd be able to read like other books outside of comics. Also, I don't really have a lot of time to just sit and read. So for me, reading would be like reading for maybe like half an hour in the morning or before I go to bed, or maybe just when I'm just brushing my teeth. So I'd just be like finding little ways where I could read, even if it was only for like 10 minutes a day. I always read while I'm doing different things to help my attention span. Sometimes I'd be reading as I like would dry my hair, or I'd be like holding my book down with my feet or something like that on the bed, and I just said like, you know, if you see wet marks in a book from me that I've like lent you, I'm really sorry. It's just my hair.
I was going to say that sometimes the school experience of reading is quite controlled in terms of like, this is how we do it, this is when we do it. Did you find reading in school restrictive in a sense because of that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it kind of helped, but also it did feel a bit restrictive. Like, we were kind of expected to finish a book within maybe a week or two, something like that, because we'd always have to write reviews, and if you were writing a review about the same book every week, the teacher would question you like, are you really reading or not? And then you would end up having to just kind of give up on the book that you were reading and just make up a review because you hadn't really finished it. And it kind of felt like, it didn't really feel fair that I was like rushed to finish a book, even though sometimes you just kind of go through periods where you don't feel like reading. Yeah, so yeah, it did feel like that sometimes. But it did kind of help that they did encourage reading a lot, in my school at least.
I mean, you obviously come through the education system with a really strong love of story and things like that. I'd really love to know your journey to becoming an illustrator. I think so. Quite a lot of the listeners of the podcast are teachers, librarians, people working with children. And I just think it's really useful to kind of have an oversight of that kind of career journey and all the different ways it can go, because they might, I'm sure, have budding illustrators of the future in their classes, in their libraries at the moment. So it's just really interesting to hear.
I think for me, like, as I said, like, storytelling was the most important thing for me in my art. To be an illustrator, it really does depend on what you find is like the most valuable thing for you when you're creating. Like I have friends who don't mind just working for a studio and helping kind of envision an idea. In a sense, they don't need their name on like the artwork and like the characters they create. They're happy to be kind of part of like a bigger vision. Whereas for me, like maybe it's just because I have a big ego or something like that. I need something that's like my own. Like, yeah, so if someone saw a drawing, to be like, oh yeah, that's like a Vivian creation. But yeah, so it just really depends on why do you love creating art? Like, why do you like illustrating? Do you want to tell stories, or do you just want to have beautiful artworks that people could like stop and stare at? It's not something that you need to find out immediately, but just while you're creating, you can really kind of discover those parts about yourself. And like, you know, the most important thing is like having fun, right? Like when you're having fun while you're drawing, it can really shine out in your artworks.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Are there times for you when it isn't fun? Are there times when you're like, I can't get this right, and you need to walk away for a while?
Yeah, I think with comics, it can be kind of tiring sometimes, that you're just kind of drawing like shot by shot, and I mean, obviously it helps move the story along, but maybe it's not the most fun thing to draw. Like the other day I had to draw loads of boats. Not really like my kind of thing. But, you know, I needed to kind of at least show that overview. I couldn't just like have the characters talk about boats and there are no boats around. So yeah, there are hard days like that, and frequently I have trouble drawing hands, and my friends consistently point out that I've drawn a hand the wrong way around, and I'm like, oh, okay, again with this. So there are some difficult days, yeah.
And have you got any tips for people getting through those difficult days if they're struggling with their own projects?
Yeah, so if you are able to, I think it helps to maybe try something different, like maybe for a little bit. Like, you say you're drawing a comic and you're really struggling to draw one scene, it might help to just move on to something else that you can go and then go back to that scene later on with a fresher mind. Or otherwise, you know, if you really need to get something done, I think it does help to go out for a bit, like take walks, just have a break, or maybe read something, or I guess something like that will really like fascinate you about whatever the subject that you're drawing is. Like, I think for me, like, I used to always really struggle with digital painting. It was very different from, like traditional, like acrylic painting, for example, which is kind of what I grew up with. And because I found it so frustrating, I didn't want to try. But after I started watching, like videos of people actually using digital paints and like really seeing what their process was like, that's what got me really interested in it. And so kind of like trick yourself into being like passionate about it as well, I guess.
I love that. That's a great tip. So actually, you have been mentioned on the podcast before at the end of the episode, and we'll get you to do one as well. But at the end of every episode, guests give us a book to add to our to be read piles. And the book that Mike Sterling from Beano recommended in his episode was Cooking with Monsters. Can you tell listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to pick it up yet a little bit more about that book?
Yes, so Cooking with Monsters is about a group of teenagers who attend this school that teaches them how to fight monsters and then cook them afterwards. So yeah, so it's a fantasy teen action story. There's like some drama in there. It's the themes are a lot about like hero worship and also just cultural identity. So Jordan Alsaka, the writer, and I, we're both POCs. Jordan is half Palestinian. So for us, it was really important to kind of touch upon like that subject of how food is related to your identity, right? So, so a lot of the characters, so whatever their favorite foods were, it really kind of linked back to like who they were. And it was about the main character sort of struggling to find herself and really accept like where she came from and who she was. So yeah, it was really important for us to kind of really explore those aspects.
I love finding out about when, and actually in the last season of Comic Boom, I had a lot of creative duos come on together, and every single one of the pairs of illustrators, writers or co-writers worked in a different way together. And it's really fascinating to me because in comics, the image and the words work together is so important, how they go together. I find it fascinating that it's two different people kind of working on those. So how did that partnership with Jordan work? How do you come together on that? And is it developing the project together? I'm just fascinated to know.
In the beginning of Cooking with Monsters, I think most of the ideas were Jordan's ideas, and I just kind of helped design the characters. And maybe if he had maybe some general ideas of what maybe like a character looked like, I'll bring forth like a range for him, so we can really see like, this is what this is what I envisioned. Like, this is kind of match of what you thought. Maybe he had no idea, and like then he kind of starts to see it himself. In bringing a book to life, what would happen is that Jordan would write an outline first, and we like me and the editors will discuss like how we feel about like maybe pacing or like just kind of the overarching story, character arcs too, and then maybe he would like go back and rewrite an outline, or maybe he have the go ahead to start writing the script out. After writing the script out, then usually once everything's okay, then I would like be able to start drawing everything that he's kind of planned out. I think with Jordan, he's very much like comic focused, so he kind of knows exactly how like a page will look like. So I kind of already have a good idea like what's gonna happen. It's very different from City of Dragons for me, because City of Dragons, I think it's a little bit more, I have a bit more say in the writing. Like there are times where I would maybe rewrite like a few lines just to either shorten the dialogue or just maybe change around like the panels or like in the page. I mean, Jamal is fantastic. I think he visions it a little bit more like a movie, I would say. So sometimes I had to kind of make it feel a bit more like a comic, like at least make it more readable in a comic. Maybe I might be dabbling too much, but like that I would have a bit more drafting with City of Dragons compared to like with Cooking with Monsters, where I can just kind of follow the script to a plan. With City of Dragons, I have a bit more free reign to kind of put in my own voice in. I think I don't know if I'm doing too much. Like, I'm really sorry, Jamal, if I'm like overstepping or something. But yeah, with City of Dragons, I have a bit more free reign to add in my own voice. Yeah, but I mean, both collaborators are like really fantastic. Jamal, he is really great to work with. I'm really glad that he does let me input like my own visions in, and he's not too precious about me maybe changing some like pages or some dialogue around, especially with the character Ramesh. Because he's British, I try to make him as British as possible that I can get away with. But sometimes like I'll add in something and even the editors don't even know what it means, and I'm like, okay, I need to like tone it down a bit maybe.
And those books, City of Dragons, been very popular. There's 2 in the series now. Are there plans for more? Is that going to be an ongoing kind of long-running series?
Oh yes, absolutely. I am working on book 3 right now, and you'll be pleased to hear that Jamal is writing book 4. We are hoping that there will be more. Yeah, I think our big inspiration for City of Dragons was the Amulet series, so we're hoping it could be just as long as Amulet.
Incredible. So book 9 on the horizon.
Yeah, hoping. Fingers crossed.
Brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. There's a lot to explore, so.
Oh, that's excellent. I've been really enjoying reading it.
Oh, I'm glad.
You've done some work in the gaming industry, am I right in that? What's your involvement been in the computer games? I feel like I'm old when I say computer games. It makes me sound old. I am old. That's the issue.
It's all good.
I am old.
It's all good. I think I was born in the right era of gaming.
Tell me about computer games.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's no secret. I'm a massive gamer. My love of games came from Pokemon, from the Game Boy. So I've loved games ever since then. And my favorite kinds of games are the ones that focus more on storytelling. Like my favorite game series is called Ace Attorney. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's basically about playing a lawyer, and the game is very heavily involved being in court. And discovering the truth about each case is fantastic.
I would like that. This is speaking to me. So I have my family, my children, my husband, all into gaming a lot, and I am. It's not that I can't do it. I'm sure if I dedicated myself and put enough effort in, I would be able to do it, but I don't. And then I am so bad, I can't even work out how to walk around, and I just give up really easily. But I know that I would like it if I invested some time.
Oh my god! I mean, I would completely recommend Ace Attorney, like the first trilogy. That's always on sale. There are some game aspects to it, but it is mostly a visual novel, which essentially just means that you're reading the whole time. The only kind of times where you have to play it is just when you're presenting evidence or you have to look for clues, things like that. But anyone could play it.
I think I could cope with that.
Oh my god! Look, yeah, please. It's so good.
So in terms of gaming and storytelling, because I think if people don't play computer games, there I am sounding old again. If they don't play on there, get them Mega Drives out.
No, not the Mega Drive.
Then they don't know about storytelling in games. And I wonder if you feel it draws really on the same set of skills between kind of books and gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like these days, there are a lot of games now that feel more like films. Like if you've ever heard of like a game called The Last of Us, that was recently made into a TV series.
My husband plays The Last of Us, and I've watched the TV series.
Yes.
It's amazing.
No, exactly. So I mean, I haven't even played or watched either, I'll have to admit, but I have heard good things, and that's games have become more and more like that. There was recently a really big game. It won Game of the Year called Baldur's Gate 3. So with that game, it's like based off of Dungeons and Dragons, and in that game they hired over 200 actors to do motion capture so that they would actually really make the game come alive with each character, because it was actually an actor behind each character. And with the writing, these characters, they felt so real, and to the point where like even the actors, most of them weren't gamers, none of them had ever really played any games before, but they even like tried to pick up the game themselves, and it was actually like not that bad of a learning curve for them, because just the game felt so much like just being part of a story rather than just a kind of action sort of thing. It really felt like you were role playing as like these characters. So I think gaming these days, storytelling has become like a big selling point now, and it kind of brings the storytelling alive. You know, you become a bit more active in the story rather than like passively reading.
Yeah, and the outcome's not necessarily predetermined, which is cool as well.
Yeah,
cool.
Especially with this game, it's very much like your actions determine the consequences.
That's very cool. I feel like I'm gonna investigate Ace Attorney. I feel like this could be my moment.
Yes.
This could be my moment. I really wanted to play Zelda, but I think Zelda was a bit beyond my skill level.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
As a starting point.
Oh my god, no, Ace Attorney. I'll take any opportunity to promote Ace Attorney to anyone. I love it so much.
Vivian, I've got to ask you, now I know World Book Day is not just about the dressing up, it is about celebrating reading, about getting children excited, building up their knowledge of all the different ways that they can read, giving them some ownership over their reading experiences. However, I love a bit of dressing up, and I cannot resist asking you, what would you dress up as if you could dress up as anything this World Book Day?
I've been thinking about this so much. I really can't decide. I mean, if I was to be completely like gratuitous, I would love to dress up as maybe Hannah from Cooking with Monsters, as in like my book. But just because the costumes I designed, they're such a pain to draw. I would love to actually have it and have our giant spatula. I would love that. So whoever's listening, if you can like make me a costume, that'd be great. Who would you dress up as?
I wasn't prepared for that question to come back to me.
It's a hard question, right? I really don't know.
I tell you what, I was trying to convince my son to just. I've literally just read this manga called Superman versus Meshi, and it's on the Excelsior Awards. a shortlist this year for sort of primary age. And because obviously he can fly wherever he wants super fast, at lunchtime he flies to Japan every day and goes and gets Japanese food. And it's just all about what he eats for his lunch. And so I was trying to convince my son to dress up as sort of Superman with like noodles, like with loads of Japanese food. But he wasn't into that idea.
No.
But so maybe I'll do that. I'll be Superman with some
noodles,
ramen or something.
An excuse to eat ramen. So good. I never heard of that. When you said meshi at first, I was thinking, is it the footballer? But now I was like, oh yeah, Japanese meshi, like food. Yeah.
yeah. It's really funny. It's such a good. I just loved reading it, and it actually made me so hungry. It's just loads of description about all the different food that he's eating on his lunch breaks. God. It's a very funny, quirky book. I liked it. So at the end of each episode, we usually have some tips for teachers, but I thought we could make them a little bit World Book Day themed this time. So I wondered if you've got any tips or ideas for bringing comics into World Book Day celebrations.
So a workshop I like to do was have kids make their own comics. So that'd be like a really fun way to celebrate World Book Day, is if you give them a prompt. They don't have to follow the prompt, and they can draw like a 4-panel comic. It's so fun to see the ideas that kids come up with. Like, they are just natural storytellers in their own way. I did this when I was in Singapore teaching arts, and I would just kind of give them an example of like a 4-panel comic that I'd made, and they can kind of follow that structure if they'd like, or if they were feeling creative, they could, do more or less. But yeah, I think that'd be like a really fun way to show how, comics are a different form of storytelling, and, and it's really fun when they can share their comics with each other. It is all parts of like reading and kind of learning how to digest like a story and comics too. I think that would be a really fun way to like celebrate World Book Day.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. That'd be something that's quite easily achievable and something you can kind of build in and be quite flexible around. And I know quite often schools are doing kind of carousels of activity where people do different things and then move around different classrooms and things. So that would be a great one to build in.
Yeah, I mean, you get the funniest stories.
Yeah, I bet. So I'm really interested to find out a little bit about your time teaching in Singapore. Did you do a lot of comics-based work? Or was it quite varied? And and any other workshop ideas I'm sure teachers would love to hear.
Yeah, so when I was there, I was invited to an international school because the kids had read City of Dragons, so they were kind of like fans already, and they wanted to learn about how to make comics. So I did focus a lot on how do you go about like writing your own comic and what's like really important. Like something I always teach when like you like starting out making a comic is that you really need to think about what's going to happen in each panel and the dialogue, if there is dialogue or if there's like text, because I found that in my early days of creating comics, I would always just draw the pictures first and not realize that I've left no room for the text, and I always have to like squeeze it in somewhere. And
that's what I do when I try and do comics.
But think about that. Like
I just started doing silent comics because I can't cope.
Yeah, like I struggled with that a lot, and so I realized you put down the text first and then draw. It makes the process so much easier, and then that way you don't like make random speech bubbles put in like weird awkward places. Like maybe it's like ends up pointing to someone's butt or something like that because you didn't plan. It's actually really important to plan. So I always try to like make sure the kids like they at least write out what they want to happen in each panel first. But yeah, I mean there are some kids who still just go ahead and draw first, which is fine. You just kind of explore what works for you. But that's like one of the tips that I always give. The stories I read when I was in Singapore was just so weird but so funny. The one that always stuck out to me was this girl who drew a story about, I think someone ate a lot of frogs or something like that, and then they went to the toilet and the frogs came out of their rear end, and then the frogs like went into the sewers, and there was like too many frogs in the sewers or something. It was just really weird. But it's funny.
Gross.
It worked.
And weird.
There was a punchline. There was a setup. It completely worked as a story. So it was great.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. The final thing I ask guests to do is to recommend a book to listeners. So if we were to add one comic or book about comics to our to-be-read piles tomorrow, what would you recommend that we read?
I think the most recent book that I read that I really loved was a book called Welcome to St. Hell by Lewis Hancock. It's a graphic memoir about the author who, it was his days as a teenager and him discovering that he was trans, but it's so like light-hearted and really funny. It's perfect for like British readers, I find, because it has that kind of northern humour in it. Yeah, I highly recommend that book.
That sounds brilliant. I haven't heard of that at all, so I'm definitely going to look that up. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. It's been brilliant to have you. I've loved hearing all about your experiences and your journey in comics. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been so fun.
Today, I'm sure lots of listeners will be tuning in with their classes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much to Vivian for joining me on this World Book Day special episode. And thanks also to BBC Teach for supporting the podcast. It's been wonderful to collaborate on another episode with you. Just to recap, the World Book Day live lesson with BBC Teach will be on Thursday the 7th of March, which is World Book Day, at 11 a.m. It's a 30-minute session online. It will be available to watch via BBC Teach and also on the CBBC channel. There'll be a link in the show notes to that. They also, ahead of time, really want to hear about your favourite books, so you can email your class's book recommendations to live.lessons@bbc.co.uk with World Book Day as the heading for a chance of a live shout-out for your school on the live session. Now, I've already harped on about my recommendation for this week. I think I will leave it at that. It links beautifully to Vivian's book, Cooking with Monsters, Superman versus Meshi. I heard about it last week through my chat with Paul, and from there I've discovered a whole subgenre of comics, gourmet manga, that Paul introduced me to. And I've also started watching some anime on this theme. There's a series on Netflix that Paul recommended to me, Delicious in Dungeon, which is an adaptation of a manga series, a gourmet manga series. I'm absolutely hooked. It's hilarious, it's bizarre, and I love it. So I just thought I'd give a shout out to Delicious in Dungeon as well. If you would like to support the podcast, as usual, you can do so by logging on to ko-fi.com/LucySB, ko-fi.com/LucySB, by leaving a review on whichever platform you listen to the podcast, and by sharing with your colleagues and networks. It is always really appreciated. That's it for this week. My name is Lucy Starbuck-Bradley, producer and host of Comic Boom. Thanks for listening.